The stage lights felt heavier tonight. Simon Cowell adjusted his position at the judge's table, the familiar weight of expectation settling around him like an old coat. Another evening, another parade of dreamers stepping into the spotlight. He'd seen thousands before, the confident, the desperate, the delusional. But something about contestant number 47 made him pause mid-sip of his water. She stood in the wings, a woman in her late 30s, with tired eyes and hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Her name was Sarah Martinez, according to the production notes, but the clipboard told him nothing about the way she kept looking toward the audience, searching for something or someone that mattered more than the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, the host's voice boomed across the packed auditorium. Please welcome Sarah Martinez. The applause was polite, routine. Sarah walked onto the stage with steps that seemed to echo louder than they should. Under the blazing spotlights, her simple blue dress looked both careful and humble, the kind of outfit chosen not for television but for a promise. Simon leaned forward slightly. There was something different about this one. No theatrical entrance, no costume, no gimmick, just a woman clutching a microphone like a lifeline. "Tell us about yourself, Sarah," he said, his voice carrying that familiar blend of authority and curiosity that had become his trademark. Sarah's eyes darted to the audience again, and this time Simon followed her gaze. In the third row sat a boy, maybe 12 years old, with the distinctive features of Down syndrome. His face was lit up with pure excitement, hands pressed together in anticipation. He wore a bright yellow shirt with "My Mom is the Best Singer" written in marker across the front. "I'm here because of my son, Miguel," Sarah began, her voice barely steady. "3 years ago, when he was going through a really difficult time at school, kids making fun of him, I made him a promise." She paused, swallowing hard. "I told him that one day I would sing in front of everyone, so he would know that being brave isn't about being perfect, it's about showing up." The audience had gone quiet now. Simon felt that familiar shift in the air, the moment when entertainment transformed into something deeper. "And what are you going to sing for us tonight?" Simon asked, though his tone had already softened. "You Raise Me Up," Sarah replied. "It's Miguel's favorite. He says it's our song." Simon nodded, leaning back in his chair. He'd heard this song performed dozens of times on various talent shows. It was a safe choice, predictable even. But as Sarah closed her eyes and took her first breath, he realized nothing about this moment was going to be predictable. The first note trembled out, uncertain and raw. Sarah's voice wasn't perfect. There was a slight waver, the nervousness of someone who sang in church choirs and car rides, not concert halls. But as her eyes found Miguel in the audience, something magical happened. The boy began to mouth every word along with her, his whole body swaying with the melody. His joy was infectious, radiating outward like ripples in still water. Other audience members turned to look at him, smiles spreading across their faces as they watched his uninhibited celebration of his mother's courage. "When I am down and oh, my soul so weary," Sarah sang, and her voice grew stronger with each phrase. "When troubles come and my heart burdened be." Simon found himself studying Miguel's face. The boy's eyes never left his mother, and in them Simon saw something he recognized but rarely encountered in this business: unconditional love. Not love dependent on success or failure, not love that demanded perfection, but love that simply existed because someone had chosen to be brave. It reminded him of something buried deep in his memory, his own mother's face when he'd performed in his school's Christmas concert at age 8. He'd forgotten half the words to Silent Night, but she'd looked at him like he was Pavarotti himself. The memory hit him with unexpected force, a reminder of what performance meant before it became business, before it became judgment, before it became his armor against the world. Sarah's story began to make more sense to him now. This wasn't about fame or fortune or even recognition. This was about a mother showing her son that courage looked like showing up, even when your voice wasn't perfect, even when the world might judge you, even when you were terrified. Miguel had been bullied, she'd said. Simon could imagine it, the cruel laughter of children who didn't understand that different didn't mean less than. How many nights had Sarah held her son while he cried, wondering how to teach him that he was worthy of love and respect? How do you explain to a child with Down syndrome that the world's limitations aren't his own? The answer, Simon realized as he watched this unfold, was exactly what Sarah was doing right now. You show them. You step onto a stage in front of hundreds of people, and you sing, not because you're the best singer in the world, but because you want your child to know that bravery isn't about being fearless, it's about being afraid and doing it. Then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. The chorus approached, and Sarah's voice soared higher than Simon had expected. It wasn't technically flawless, but it carried something more valuable than perfect pitch. It carried truth. This wasn't a performance. It was a conversation between a mother and her son, conducted in front of 1,000 strangers who had suddenly become witnesses to something sacred. Miguel began to clap along, completely oblivious to any notion that this might disrupt the performance. Other audience members joined him, not because they were prompted, but because his joy demanded participation. Simon felt his professional armor begin to crack. He'd built his career on identifying talent, on separating the wheat from the chaff with surgical precision. But Miguel didn't care about any of that. He was watching his mother keep a promise, and that was enough to make her the greatest performer in the world. "You raise me up so I can stand on mountains," Sarah sang, and her voice broke slightly on the word mountains. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Miguel needed her to finish. "You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders." Simon's throat tightened. His own mother had died when he was young, and he'd spent decades building balls around the tender places that loss had created. But watching Miguel's unwavering support for his mother, seeing the way love could exist without condition or criticism, those walls began to feel less necessary. The final chorus built, and Sarah's voice found a power that surprised everyone, including herself. The audience was on their feet now, but they weren't performing their applause. They were experiencing it. Miguel stood on his chair, his arms raised in celebration, tears of pride streaming down his face. "You raise me up to more than I can be." The last note hung in the air like a prayer answered. The auditorium erupted, but Simon remained seated, staring at the stage where Sarah stood with tears in her eyes, looking directly at her son. Miguel was jumping up and down, pointing at his mother and shouting to anyone who would listen, "That's my mom. She kept her promise. She's the best singer in the whole world." The other judges were already reaching for their buzzers, but Simon raised his hand, stopping them. He stood up slowly, his movements deliberate and careful. The microphone felt heavier than usual as he picked it up. "Sarah," he began, his voice quieter than anyone in the auditorium had ever heard it. "I've been doing this for a very long time. I've heard singers with voices that could shatter glass, performers who could command stadiums, artists who could move mountains." He paused, looking out at Miguel, who was still bouncing with excitement. "But I have never," Simon continued, "witnessed anything quite like what just happened here. You didn't just sing a song tonight. You showed us what love looks like when it refuses to give up." Sarah covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed. Simon walked around the judges' table, something he rarely did. The cameras followed him as he approached the stage, but for once, he didn't seem to notice them. "Miguel," he called out to the audience, "would you come up here, please?" Security helped the boy navigate to the stage, where he ran directly to his mother's arms. Sarah knelt down to his level, holding him close as he whispered excitedly in her ear about how proud he was. Simon approached them both, his usual commanding presence replaced by something gentler. "Miguel," he said, crouching down to the boy's eye level, "your mom told me she made you a promise. Do you think she kept it?" Miguel nodded vigorously. "She's the bravest person in the whole world," he said, with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "She practiced every day after work, and sometimes she cried because she was scared. But she did it anyway because she promised me." The innocence of the revelation hit Simon like a physical blow. This woman had been carrying this burden for 3 years, practicing in secret, fighting her own fears and insecurities, all to keep a promise to her son who had been hurt by a world that didn't always understand him. "Did she really practice every day?" Simon asked gently. "Every single day," Miguel confirmed, his eyes bright with pride. "In the kitchen while she made dinner, in the car when we went to the store, even in the bathroom." He giggled at this last part, and his joy was so infectious that Simon found himself smiling, genuinely smiling, for the first time all evening. "And you knew she was scared?" Miguel's expression grew more serious, wise beyond his years. "Sometimes moms get scared too," he said matter-of-factly. "But she told me that promises are more important than being scared. She said keeping promises is how we show people we love them." Simon felt something crack open in his chest. In all his years of judging performances, evaluating dreams, and deciding fates, he had never encountered wisdom quite like this. A 12-year-old boy with Down syndrome had just explained the entire purpose of love in a single sentence. Simon felt something shift inside his chest, a recognition that perhaps bravery wasn't about conquering stages or winning competitions. Perhaps it was about showing up for the people who needed you to be strong, even when your voice trembled and your hands shook. "Sarah," Simon said, standing and facing her directly, "I want you to know that your son is right. What you did tonight wasn't just brave, it was necessary. The world needs more mothers like you, more people willing to keep promises that matter." He paused, glancing back at his fellow judges who were watching with expressions he'd never seen before. "It's a yes from me," Simon announced. "Not because you're going to win this competition, but because you've already won something far more important." The audience exploded again, but Simon wasn't finished. "Miguel, I have something for you too," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small pin, one of the show's official badges that were rarely given to audience members. "This is for being the best audience member we've ever had. Your love for your mother showed all of us what really matters." Miguel took the pin with reverence, immediately showing it to his mother as if it were made of gold. As Sarah and Miguel walked off stage together, the boy chattering excitedly about everything that had just happened, Simon returned to his seat. But he didn't sit down immediately. Instead, he stood for a moment, watching them disappear into the wings. "That," said one of his fellow judges, "was something special." Simon nodded, finally taking his seat. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the best performances aren't about talent at all. They're about love refusing to be quiet." The next contestant was already being introduced, but the energy in the room had fundamentally changed. The audience was softer now, more open, more willing to see beyond the surface of each performance to the human story underneath. Later that evening, as Simon reviewed the footage in his dressing room, he paused on a frame that captured Miguel's face during his mother's final note. The boy's expression held such pure joy, such unwavering faith in his mother's magnificence, that Simon found himself staring at it for several minutes. He thought about his own relationship with performance, with perfection, with the relentless pursuit of excellence that had defined his career. Then he thought about Miguel, who had found perfection in his mother's imperfect voice simply because she had shown up and kept her word. But it wasn't just the footage that stayed with him, it was what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. Sarah had approached him backstage, Miguel still clutching his pen like a treasure, and she'd said something that would echo in his mind for weeks to come. "Thank you for seeing us," she had whispered, tears still fresh on her cheeks. Not just for seeing the performance, but for seeing why it mattered. The production assistant had mentioned that Sarah worked 2 jobs to support herself, and Miguel. She'd taken vacation time she couldn't afford to be here tonight, all because she'd promised her son 3 years ago that she would be brave for him. The next morning, Simon would wake up different. Not dramatically, not in ways that would change his professional standards or alter his approach to the show, but in small ways, a gentler word here, a moment of patience there, a recognition that sometimes the most profound performances happen not despite our vulnerabilities, but because of them. He would find himself thinking about Sarah and Miguel at unexpected moments during commercial breaks, between meetings in the quiet spaces where his mind used to focus solely on ratings and marketability. He began to see contestants differently, looking for the stories behind their songs, the love that had brought them to his stage. Word of Sarah's performance spread beyond the show. Video clips appeared online, shared not because of her vocal technique, but because of the pure love that radiated from that stage. A local news station interviewed Sarah and Miguel, and his answer became the soundbite that played around the world. "She wasn't just singing to the judges, she was singing to me. And when someone sings to you like that, it means you matter." Sarah Martinez never made it to the final rounds of the competition. Her voice, while heartfelt, lacked the technical precision required to compete with seasoned professionals. But that didn't matter to Miguel, who kept the video of her performance on his tablet and showed it to anyone willing to watch. And sometimes, late at night when the industry felt too cynical and the business too cold, Simon would remember a boy in a yellow shirt jumping on his chair, celebrating his mother's courage to be imperfect in front of the world. Because that night, under the bright lights of a talent show stage, they had all learned that the most beautiful performances aren't always the most polished ones. They're the ones that keep promises. They're the ones that choose love over fear. They're the ones that remind us what it means to be human.